Hey everyone, Tankenstein here. In this video, I've got your very first gameplay and overview of the F-106A Delta Dart, specifically the 6-shooter variant, which is a modernized variant of the Delta Dart interceptor. Now, that said, this is a rank 6 battle rating 9.3 fighter, and as you see, it does say a fighter. In real life, it was an interceptor, and in War Thunder, it plays much more like an interceptor, and I'll go over why in just a second. Now, this being the modernized variant, has both helmet-mounted display and IRST, which is crazy at 9.3 BR. Typically, you don't see helmet-mounted displays until at least 12.0 BR, if not higher than that. So this thing is bonkers. I think other than this, the lowest BR vehicle that has it is the F4J in the American Air Tech Tree, which is currently 12.0 BR. Also, the radar on it is pretty damn good. Despite the fact that no, it does not have pulse Doppler radar, it is very, very capable and actually tracks quite well. One of the best radars easily at 9.3 BR. All this stuff aside, you might be saying to yourself, how is this 9.3 BR? It's got crazy speed. It's probably only second in terms of overall speed and acceleration compared to the F-104. It's even got really good turn time, better than what the stat card says, even though the energy bleed is absolutely atrocious in a turn. Why is this thing such a low BR? Quite honestly, it comes down to the missiles. And you might be looking at the missiles and saying to yourself, wow, how are these bad? 3.0 Mach, 27 Gs of overload, 10-kilometer launch range, and they're even kind of lightweight? How are these bad? Well, the problem with these missiles is that they have a direct contact fuse. Now, you might be asking yourself, you might be asking yourself a lot in this video, why is a direct contact fuse bad? Well, pretty much every air-to-air missile in War Thunder, as far as I know, they have proxy fuse, which means you get close enough to the enemy, they blow up and they either severely damage or destroy the enemy aircraft. These, you have to actually make direct contact with the enemy aircraft in order to actually have it blow up, which is a big problem because that Mach 3.0 speed really isn't all that high. These things are not that fast. 27 Gs of overload, it's not that good. These are all in ideal situations. And not only that, if they maneuver at all, you're going to have it where these miss entirely. You can miss this close, right within a few inches, and it's not going to blow up. Whereas even an AIM-9B or an R3S will blow up and probably destroy the fighter with it. These do not do that. And the reason being is because they were designed to go after bombers. This is an interceptor after all, so if it was going to be deployed against a bomber fleet, you don't really have to worry about maneuvering aircraft, and bombers are huge, they're easy to hit directly, so what was the worry about it? Also, these things are internally mounted, which means that anytime that you have your missile tray out, you're blocking your gun, which means that you have to go into any given dogfight with this, and you have to know whether or not you're going to use it as a gunfighter or a missile fighter. Believe it or not, that's how this thing works. It is a very unique aircraft in War Thunder, but because of that, because this thing is so hands-on, I'm actually taking a very different approach to how I normally record these types of videos. I'm actually recording my audio after I record the gameplay, so I can give you guys a more concise view of this thing, but also because of how hands-on this vehicle is, I really can't focus on giving you guys good audio, giving you guys good description on how this thing flies, and also record good gameplay at the same time. It's just kind of impossible. That's how hands-on this thing is. It's a very unique aircraft in War Thunder. That being said, let's go ahead, get into it, and if I'm not already playing gameplay in the background, just see how this thing flies, but it is definitely unique. Now, with all that said, I'm just going to go ahead and start by saying that this vehicle is very, very flawed, and it really comes down to the fact that the missiles suck, and being that it has missiles, a lot of players, myself included, especially right when I first got this, they're drawn to using the missiles, but because the missiles block the guns, you're going to have a really, really bad time. So basically, you're stuck with ordnance that is almost useless outside of attacking bombers, which again, being that this thing is the current BR that it is, you're not going to be able to actually hit bombers with the missiles because there are no bombers to hit, because again, that's what the missiles were designed to go against in real life, and because War Thunder more or less kind of mirrors real life, it's just not going to be good versus fighters. And I kind of have a very, very similar experience to how the US was in Vietnam, how they only had like 5 kills versus actual fighters with these AIM-4s. I have very few kills ever with the AIM-4s after firing dozens and dozens and dozens of them. But with that being said, the main thing with this vehicle is that, yes, the missiles suck, however, when it comes to its guns and its overall performance, you can actually do quite well with this vehicle. And I feel like a lot of people are going to get caught up in the fact that yes, this thing does turn very well, but it bleeds speed incredibly quickly, and being that this thing can turn well, they feel like they have to make it turn well. But again, due to that huge energy bleed, you have a substantial problem with turning. So what I've done to great success, I've had like a 5-6 kill match, I've had a few 3-4 kill matches here and there. What I've done is basically just kind of almost treat this thing like an F-104 in a way, but with the ability to turn when you need to. So you almost kind of want to drive by. You want to be a scavenger with the F-106. You want to make it so that this thing picks off enemies that are either low energy, or just picks them off maybe in a head-on, or you're just going by really quickly, you shoot them down, and that's it. You pretty much like an interceptor would do. And again, Gaijin did this thing a big disservice by calling it a jet fighter, because it just does not give the correct connotation for a lot of players when they see this thing. I mean, a lot of players who play War Thunder, they don't really know what these vehicles were meant to do in real life, and if you treat this thing like an interceptor, it goes really fast, it's great in a straight line, then you do really well. But because this is a large delta wing fighter, it does really well in a turn up until about 2 seconds into the turn. Then you have no speed left, and then you're going to be picked off by anyone who is anywhere nearby you. So you pretty much, again, have to treat this thing like it's a drive-by machine, like it's just a moving bullet. It just goes really fast in a straight line, and that's it. Because if you start turning with this thing all the time, you are dead. Only turn when you know that there are not enemies in give or take your general vicinity, except of course versus the fighter that you're going up against, and you should do pretty well. I mean, this thing can turn with most MiGs, but again, the big problem is that once you're in that turn, you will lose all of your speed. I mean, you're talking just about sub Mach 1, and you go down to around 400-ish, maybe even 300 kilometers per hour in just a few seconds. This thing can pretty much just take one turn and you're done. But one thing that I've actually noticed with this thing, especially if you're kind of closer to Mach 1, just a little bit sub Mach 1, is if you take like partial turns, like a quarter of a turn or a third of a turn, you do lose some speed, obviously, but it's not going to be tremendous. It's really once you put yourself into that huge full turn, that's when you start losing a tremendous amount of speed, and that's where you start dying with the F-106. And that's where I'm actually catching a lot of players who are using the F-106 off guard, because they have no energy once they commit to that full turn, and maybe like they're high up in the sky. That's another big problem with the F-106. They are going at like 200, 300 kilometers per hour, and they are an easy kill. You can easily hit them even with your aim for Falcons if they are in these low energy states. And again, just kind of going back to the Falcons here, they have contact fuses, and I don't really know if a lot of people genuinely appreciate the fact that contact fuses suck, especially compared to proxy fuses. You have a lot of people out there, you know, they're going around saying the AIM-9B, for example, sucks, or the R3S sucks, and yes, in general, they do really suck, especially compared to like AIM-9Ls, AIM-9Ms, R73s, even R60Ms. They really do suck. However, they have the proxy fuse, and any day of the week, I would use AIM-9Bs or R3Ss over the AIM-4 Falcons any day of the week. And again, it really comes down to the fact that it has a proxy fuse as opposed to the contact fuse. I mean, I have not hit a single AIM-4 Falcon in several games, despite probably firing like over a dozen of them, which again kind of lends credence to the fact that these things suck in Vietnam, and they are pretty much useless versus fighters. And again, the biggest problem with the AIM-4 Falcons is that when you bring them out, you no longer have access to your gun. So you actually have to set up the toggle, if you don't already have it already, in order to deploy and also retract the bomb bay doors. Because what happens is the trays for these missiles, they come out through the bomb bay and they block your gun, which is just incredibly detrimental. And it also makes this thing into an incredibly hands-on plane. So if you are going to be using your missiles, you pretty much have to be like, oh, okay, I'm going to go shoot a missile at that guy, then you have to retract your bomb bay as per usage, and then of course you want to fire your gun, then you want to pull out your bomb bay again, that takes another second or two, and then you want to fire another missile maybe, but oh look, that guy is coming towards you. Now you have to retract your bomb bay before you use your missile, and because a lot of these engagements can be over within 2 or 3 seconds, you pretty much almost have to never use your missiles, because the missiles are practically useless, and the only time where they do have any sort of use, and this is incredibly rarely, is if you're fighting something like an A-10 or anything really with an all-aspect missile, and then you can kind of lock on the AIM-4G, for example, versus the heat signature of it, and kind of use use it as a flare in order to throw off that all-aspect missile. That is pretty much the only use for them outside of versus bombers, which again, I have not seen a single bomber with the F-106 in match, which kind of brings up another point here. I don't know if the 9.3 BR is factoring in the missiles at all, but if it is, it really should be a lower BR at like maybe 9.0 BR. These missiles are practically useless versus fighters, and that is a big problem because I feel like a lot of people get caught up on the AIM-4 missiles. Again, they feel like they have to use them because they have them, but you're almost better off just not even bringing missiles with you at all. One, so you don't have the temptation, but two, so that they don't negatively impact your performance. I mean, the amount of times I fired missiles and have not gotten a hit is ridiculous. Even in a low BR match with like an AIM-9B, for example, I've had a lot of matches where I've gotten like 2 or 3 kills with an AIM-9B, and that's pretty damn good. Or rather, with several AIM-9Bs. I mean, heck, if you look at other American event vehicles like the F4D Skyray or the F11F1 Tiger, those both have access to 4 AIM-9Bs, and those AIM-9Bs are pretty damn decent at 9.0 BR. They're not good by any means, but they're decent enough, and they actually offer a feasible option to actually be able to take out enemy players. Whereas the AIM-4s are pretty much a detriment to the F-106, at least how they currently are, being that you don't have bombers to go up against. And so any day of the week, I'd probably rather take an F11F1 in a full up tier, or an F4D even in a full up tier, over the F-106 Delta Dart. And it simply comes down to the fact that yes, the F-106 is faster, and it does maneuver a little bit better than those. It is a delta wing design, it bleeds speed incredibly quickly, and so really it's a very one-sided, very non-versatile aircraft, and also you don't have any sort of anti-ground ordnance, which kind of sucks, but it really doesn't matter. I mean, this thing is designed to be an interceptor, so it kind of makes sense that it does not have that anti-ground ordnance, but again, kind of just makes it so that you're only going to be fighting against aircraft, and that is pretty much it. So it's a very one-sided vehicle, very non-versatile vehicle, and again, being that the AIM-4s, which are kind of like the signature weapon on this thing, especially when it comes to the helmet-mounted display, and even the IRST, those two technologies, again, the HMD and also the IRST, they're pretty much useless because the weapons that are paired to them, the AIM-4s, are again useless. Now this kind of brings up another point of mine. Should this thing see a BR decrease? Possibly. I could see maybe 9.0 being good, maybe down to 8.7, but I highly doubt it. And the reason being is that this thing is so incredibly fast. I mean, you are talking F-104 levels of fast, that if you were to put it down sufficiently low, you're going to have a vehicle that can just artificially extend every match that it's in, because you have that one guy that decides that going 1,500 kilometers per hour at like 10,000 meters is just going to kind of make the match go on forever, and that's just not fair to anybody. And yes, by the way, you can report people that artificially extend matches. It's called passive playing. So basically, if they're not actually playing the match, they're just kind of flying around doing nothing, you can actually report people for that. Just your little hint of the day. But that being said, the F-106, if it goes down too much in BR, yeah, you might occasionally have to fight bombers, which again is what this thing was meant to do in real life. But the big problem with fighting those bombers is that once they're dead, you still run into many of the same issues that you run into at its current BR, in that it really can't keep up with other fighters in turns, because once you start turning with this thing, you have incredibly poor energy bleed, and then you have other fighters that will just kind of go on you and eat you like piranhas in the Amazon River. So it just becomes a pretty big problem. I think that this thing would thrive quite a bit more. It would actually do quite well at 9 or 8.7 BR, almost too well as a matter of fact. So again, I think 9.0, possibly even staying at 9.3, wouldn't be the biggest thing, but this is a very difficult plane to use because one, you are tempted to bring those missiles into battle. Two, those missiles with their missile tray makes it so that you cannot fire your gun. 3, kind of making it so that you use your missiles when you want to in your gun, and then kind of retracting the missile bay, and then unretracting it, and then deploying it, whatever the case may be. Kind of like all those motions just so that you can use your gun or use your missiles when you want. That becomes a big problem. And of course, the energy bleed. A lot of people are using this thing. They're like, oh, well, there's a fighter. I have to go turn around and go fight him. You don't necessarily have to do that. Just kind of move on. The amount of times I've sped past an F-100 and they cannot catch catch me because even though they're supersonic, I'm just that much quicker than them. This thing can do that, and you need to use its speed to its advantage and only turn with a full turn if you absolutely need to, and again, if there are no enemies nearby. If you treat this thing kind of like an F-104 in some ways, but again, with the ability to make emergency turns that are really, really good, but really, really short-lived, you can do really, really well with the Delta Dart. I just feel like there are a lot of people, especially right now, that do not understand the mechanics of energy bleed, especially when it comes to Delta Wing, because they're new players at top tier, because this is like one of their first top tier vehicles. Maybe this is their first Delta Wing aircraft. They have a lot to learn with it, but if you can master the Delta Dart, I have actually, again, had some matches where I've done very, very well, and it comes down to the fact you just have to master it, use its strengths to your advantage, and you will do quite well. Don't go into a match thinking that you're going to have any success with the aim force, because you won't. They are a contact fuse only, not a proxy fuse, and you are going to have a bad time. I just bring them because, heck, you never know, I might land a kill and they're in an internal bomb base, so they're not increasing the drag on my aircraft, which means that their performance penalty isn't all that great, and they're also relatively small and light missiles, so again, they're not all too big of a payload, so it's not all too terrible to bring them, because you never know, you might be able to use them, but I've had probably less than a 10% kill rate with them, probably even like a 5% kill rate at that, which is telling. With like the AIM-9B and the R3s, I have a much higher kill rate, and again, it all comes down to proxy fuse versus contact fuse, which again, contact fuse is what the AIM-4s have. So that being said, let me know what you guys think about this in the comments below. Again, I feel like the F-106 is a very playable vehicle. It is a very redeemable vehicle. Should it be a 9.3 BR? I'm not entirely sure. I don't really think it should go down to like 8.7 BR, possibly 9.0. I've heard some people talking about 9.7 BR, which I kind of think is ridiculous. But again, if you play this thing to its strengths, it can be quite good. But again, it has huge issues in the fact that the missiles get in the way of the gun, which the gun is easily the best part of this thing offensively. And then of course you can turn really well, but if you turn, then you're going to lose all your speed. It just becomes a big problem. So again, let me know what you guys think in the comments below. If I were to put this thing on sale, if I were to purchase this thing, I would say probably in its current state, maybe $10 or $15, maybe add about $5 if it were to go down in BR, or if there were some sort of buffs that the missiles or this plane were to see in the future. Who knows? We'll just have to wait and see exactly what comes of this once people kind of get more used to its game style. But either way, thanks again, and I'll see you all on the other side. Take care, everyone.